Hello and welcome to Backstage with Gig Performer. My name is Brett Pontecorvo, and we're here every Thursday with musicians of all types, going through how they're using Gig Performer to power their live performance. Every week is a bit of an adventure because we're always seeing people using the same product to create many different outputs, which is a ton of fun. If you are watching right now, go ahead and say hello in the comments. Let us know where you are tuning in from. I know we've got Carl Lutz from Bavaria. Carl, thank you so much for being here. Impulse Music as well. Thank you for being here too. While you are coming in and saying hello, I want to talk just a little bit about Carl and what he has been up to and what he's been working on. So let me pull up this reel for you. Well, the dangers of live television. Here we go. There we are. So Don coming on. Don is the keyboard player for two different bands, for the Blue Genies as well as for the McCartney Experience. And today we're going to be talking through not just how he's using Gig Performer, but I think one of the perhaps most interesting things in chatting with Don and understanding the way that he thinks about his setup and his projects is that Don really takes a instrument first approach. So even though Gig Performer is powering his sounds and his set lists and all of that good stuff, he's really thinking about all of this from the perspective of how am I building my instrument, which is actually quite unique among backstage guests. So we're in for a real treat here. Just want to make sure we don't have any other comments coming in. Let's see here. Glenn, so happy to have you. Harry coming in from sunny Central Florida. Thanks for being here, Harry. And Thomas, thanks for being here as well. We've got more fantastic episodes coming up next week. So if you're new here, do be sure to tune in. Next week, we've got another amazing episode for you. But without further ado, I want to bring on this week's guest. So welcome to Backstage with Gig Performer, Don. Oops, wrong one.
Great to be here.
Yes. So happy to have you, Don. My countdown clock disappeared. It was a strange thing. Anyway, the wonders of technology. All right, so for folks who are watching, they maybe don't know who you are, don't know what you do. What do you do, Don? What's your 30-second introduction?
So I am the keyboard player for the McCartney Experience, as well as for the Blue Genies. Question for you, Brett. Is there any way to get this echo of my voice out?
I have no echo of your voice.
Okay. All right.
So I don't. If you can hear me when you pull your ears out, then maybe does that get rid of the check?
That's so much better.
Well, yeah. Amazing.
So we'll do it that way. Okay. All right. So anyway. Yeah, so I'm the keyboard player for the McCartney Experience as well as the Blue Genies. Blue Genies is a David Bowie band.
Yes.
McCartney Experience, obviously, is as the name says. And there are two very, very different concepts of keyboard work that I do. Certainly the McCartney Experience, I think it's more, I take almost a classical composer, George Martin approach to a lot of my interpretations.
Yes.
And with David Bowie stuff, it's a more experimental synth kind of piano guy thing. But the piano work in Bowie's stuff, because of his pianist, who was a kind of a very aggressive bebop jazzy kind of guy when he joined the band. Yes. So that creates a different kind of approach, if I'm doing anything intuitive on stage.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And how did you end up in two? How did you end up in both bands? Is there member overlap, or how did that occur?
Right. So, well, if you want to go back to the 70s,
yes,
the singer that I'm currently working with in the Blue Genies, he and I were in a band that was based in Baltimore, and that was a progressive rock band. Um, that goes back to the days when, everything I was using was all massive keyboard rigs on stage where you needed four guys to get the Hammond and
Yep.
CP70 on stage and all that. And that band did a lot of Kansas
Okay.
and things like that. So his name's John West, and John and I kept in touch, through the years, and we've been in various bands together.
Mm-hmm.
And then he sort of got involved in a whole lot of other projects, and I went my way.
Yep.
But we kept in touch, and so that's how I kind of got into the Blue Genies thing. It actually started as a benefit band. It was a one-shot deal that we did for a local benefit show that happens yearly called the Standstock Festival, and we got together with some of our friends, and we did the show, and John and I talked, and he was really into Bowie, and he wanted to try to explore that avenue. So I said, well, if you ever come up with anything, keep me in mind.
Yep.
And he moved to Florida and got involved with guys down there. But when we do the Bowie band up here, they fly up here.
Wow.
So the principals from that band fly up here, and then it's I play up here with a drummer up here.
Wow.
So, and now as far as the McCartney thing goes, I had known Jed Duvall is the Paul in the band, and
yep.
he's got a very strong background in acting as well as performing,
Okay.
as far as music as well. So his concept of the McCartney thing is to try to give people a little bit more of the flavor of Paul.
Yes.
I mean, he definitely has the look.
Yep.
And he tells some stories about the Beatles on stage. So that's a little bit different of a presentation.
Yep.
It's a rock band for sure, but it's almost like watching a Broadway-ish, in the sense that it's a theater experience. You can sit and listen, and Jed will talk to the crowd between stuff. The Bowie band is definitely more of a heavier rock format, doing more of the heavy passion of Bowie. So it's two different concepts. As far as getting into the McCartney band, Jed had a keyboard player, and I had gone out to see Jed a number of times. That's how we met. And one day his keyboard player couldn't make the show, and I was recovering from knee surgery and just kind of sitting at home feeling bad about myself.
Yep, sure.
And Jed reached out to me and he said, hey, my keyboard player can't make the gig. Would you be interested? So I wasn't playing at the time, and I had Gig Performer at the time, but I hadn't really worked with it on a project.
Yep.
And I felt that if I was going to do the McCartney thing, I needed something like Gig Performer that would allow me to cover so many different instrumental parts at once. And so that sort of, I did the fill-in gig, and it went great, and everybody really liked my playing, and
that was that.
I ended up staying in the band.
Wow. So okay. So this is interesting, and I don't think I pieced this together the last time we were chatting. So it was you being asked to fill in is actually what launched you into Gig Performer.
Yeah. Yeah, because before that, for 30 years, I was in a private events band, and I was I have a long background with, sequencers and all that stuff on stage, and I've used, I don't know how many hundreds of different products on stage, but anyway, I'm old, so
there you go.
I've been using a lot of stuff, but I had been using all, like a player software on stage, WAV file player, and was keeping things kind of simple in the private events band because there was just so much material to cover. But I really got tired of playing along with tracks, and I really wanted to find a product that would enable me to have one instrument on stage, but one that could do everything I wanted to do. And through all the years of playing, there are a lot of things I want to do, and every keyboard I had always had its limitation. So when Jed asked me about the McCartney project, at that point, I said, okay, well, I have the time because I can't work, I have a day job, but I wasn't working because I couldn't work because I was in recovery. So I figured, okay, I'll try gig performer now and really kind of see what its full potential is.
Yes.
And I picked Live and Let Die as the song to prove whether it would do it for me.
Yes.
Because to me, that was sort of one of the ultimate, split keyboards and all these, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do that sort of thing? And I was able to do it.
Wow.
So from that point on, I started getting deeper and deeper into gig performer. And now it's my main instrument that I would use on stage.
Yeah. And you're using the terminology too, it's my main instrument.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
because, go ahead.
Go ahead. Talk about that more.
Well, what I was going to say is that, there's thousands of VSTs out there.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of consider VSTs more in the concept of an oscillator.
Sure.
Okay. And we talked earlier that, one of my early synths that I used on stage was an ARP 2600 back in the 70s.
Yes.
And so that was a patch cord sort of scenario, which, by the way, I wouldn't recommend anybody just try to only use an ARP 2600 on stage because it was a nightmare, but that's another story.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's sort of the concept that I take now to gig performer with the wiring view. And, so gig performer is my instrument, and whatever sound I'm looking for, I can draw from different VSTs, and then I can meld them together in a performance rack space that works for a certain song that lets me perform the instrument. And that's a big deal to me. The idea of performing the instrument is a real big deal to me. I use pitch bend on my aftertouch on my key lab a lot, extensively. And of course we'll get into the breath controller later. But I like to feel what I'm playing, physically feel it, and not when I'm on stage. I don't want to think about all the technical things. I want to think of the physical things that lets me perform intuitively. Because I don't usually play the same song exactly the same every time I play it. I might just be in a different mood one time, or I might feel like when Jed is singing a ballad, I'll listen to his voice, and if I feel that the orchestra part that I'm performing needs to come up a little bit, or maybe I might go to some different inversions. So, guys that are super trained, sorry. I mean, I know you've got, like all the background that I don't have. I'm self-taught. I play by ear.
Yeah.
And, I tend to listen very closely to what the singer is doing, because I was a front man at one time, a vocalist, wanted to be, the second Billy Joel kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I understand what a singer is looking for to enhance the passion, whatever passion they're trying to bring to the stage. So that will change, from night to night, possibly, or even just the feel of what the band is doing might change a little bit here and there.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So you find that having, a deeply physical connection to what you're playing actually lets you perform better.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'll tell you, I used to work for years at Washington Music Center, Chuck Levin's, which was, one of the premier spots in the DC area. And we had every keyboard in the world.
Wow.
And I would always just turn off the keyboards and I'd walk around and feel their key beds.
Yes.
And again, this is just me.
Yep.
This is just me. But if I didn't relate to how the keyboard felt, I wouldn't consider the instrument to use on stage.
Yep.
And thankfully, I mean, all the major manufacturers, they really, back in the day, were putting great actions into their key beds.
Yep.
So I did get to use, products by, a lot of different brands.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. It's true. For years I played on an Arturia Key Lab 88, the fully weighted model, which I liked a lot.
Okay.
And then for various reasons, I switched to the Studio SL. And I do love the way it feels, but I noticed that I actually need to alter the velocity curve for it to work with what I expect it to do.
Yeah.
Which is easy enough to do in Gig Performer, so I don't ever stress about it. But I, until that point, had just always played Korg. Like everything I owned was a Korg, and then
Gotcha.
when
Well,
I
Korg
moved,
had great, I mean, the M1 and all that
yep,
stuff. I mean, great keypads.
yep,
Still to this day, really.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then it was in that moment that I was like, oh, I kind of understand what all these people are talking about when they're like they really want to be connected. Cool. So, when you're thinking about Gig Performer in terms of an instrument, is there a song you could show us maybe that would help portray like that instrumental framework a little bit?
Um, they all kind of
Great. Pick your favorite
they're
one.
all, I mean,
and
it
talk
doesn't
about it.
really matter.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna
Where do
put
you want to start? I'll bring up
I'm
your
gonna put an ear in.
Say it again.
I mean, if you just take the beginning of the show that we do,
Yeah.
you know, uh, so the intro starts with that,
Mm-hmm.
but then I like to bring in an acoustic piano. And being able to have those different, I'm going to take this out for a second.
Yeah, sure.
Being able to have those different textures
Mm-hmm.
lets me build up the night or the song actually. So initially I start with just kind of a rosy thing, right?
Yep.
And of course the signature synth. But when I go to the second part, well, now I have an acoustic piano there with the strings, and it just helps brighten it up a little bit.
Yes.
To kind of enhance it, so then when I finally go to that part, it lifts it up more.
Yes.
So.
And how are you accomplishing that? Are you using variations?
Yeah. So that's a good question. So I don't use a set. I don't use a set list.
Okay.
So I know that's like a lot of guys, they think that immediately you have to do a set list. I will say, though, that my format here is very structured in the course of a performance. By that, I mean, I already know weeks ahead of time, usually, what our playlist is going to be for the show. Mm-hmm. So I arrange all my rack spaces in the order of the show.
Yep.
And I just use my rack space view.
Yep.
And then I have variations on each rack space that steps me through the individual parts and layers. So, we have the Venus and Mars intro, which has the Rhodesy kind of thing.
Yep.
And then the second intro has the acoustic piano thing.
Yep.
And then from there we go into Jet, which is probably a good time to.
Yes.
Put this guy on.
Yeah. Talk to us about what that is.
So this is a tech breath controller.
Yep.
And it's a mouthpiece, has a tube that runs through it. I don't know the exact physics design of how everything works, but it has a wire here. Probably somebody that watches this would say, well, I think it's like a piezo electric component in there.
Okay.
And then it's connected by USB.
Nice.
To my computer.
Yep.
And when you first install it, there's a little software program that you can install to set your parameters. But basically, it tracks breath.
Yep.
This one is a breath and bite controller. So if I bite on my mouthpiece, it gives another MIDI parameter.
Okay.
And then it also has, I guess it's a gyroscopic sort of feature, where if you tilt your head back and forth, you get one parameter, and if you tilt it left and right, you get another parameter. Nice. And all of those parameters can get, actually, this is probably very much tied into your
Yes.
initial question
Yes,
of
exactly. Yep.
creating an instrument, because this lets me. I'm going to just jump to the ending of Jet.
Yeah,
real
sure.
quick. Okay, so the ending of Jet, it ends with that phrase, right? So this lets me. So if I tilt my head back, I'm able to get the higher harmonic. If I bite on it, I can add some growl. Let's see. I think Blue Jean might be a good one.
Yeah. Yes. So it's sending in, I'm assuming it's sending in pitch bend messages, but it's also then some of the other ones must be just control change, right? Just regular CC messages.
They are.
Okay.
Yeah. So
And are you mapping them to go ahead.
That's going into the swam sax, by the way.
Got it.
Which I configure to respond. So let me see if I open up Blue Jean. Where is my swam tuner? All right. So you can see that, right?
I can see it. Should I have you on the screen as well? Yeah, I can see you now. Let me bring
you don't have to have me on the screen.
Okay.
But so right now I'm going to just bite it, right?
Vibrato. I see it.
So I'm adding vibrato, a little bit of flutter, and a little bit of growl. Now that's Blue Jean, the David Bowie song Blue Jean, because I wanted the sax to really have a lot of grit.
Yes.
Okay, so I can add it with that. And then if I tilt my head, let's see if okay, so if you look all the way to the right of that screen, there's something called overblow in the lower right-hand corner.
Yep.
And I'm just going to tilt this back, and you can see how overblow turns on and off.
Yes.
Okay, so the overblow in the swam sax is the higher harmonic that sax players can get when they're really doing their high pitched squeal.
Got it. And then your self-suspending expression, which I'm assuming is just mapped to the amount of air you're piping through.
Right. So if you look at expression, you can see over there to the right of the saxophone icon. Mm-hmm. The harder I blow it, the more expression I get.
Yes. And
the pitch bend is actually coming from my aftertouch.
Wow. So
on the keyboard.
Just to synthesize all of this and make sure I'm understanding correctly, when you press a key on your keyboard, that's sending the note on-off message. You're controlling the dynamic that with the rate of air.
Yes.
And then when you're biting on it, you got the flutter and the vibrato, and the overblow has to do with how you're moving your head. Yeah.
Yes. Overblow has to do with my head position.
Yes. Wow. So it really does, like, implementing breath controller into your setup actually lets you play things that you wouldn't be able to play if you were just using the piano. Yeah, definitely. So way more expression. But you do also use at times the Rolly Seaboard.
Right. So the Seaboard I use, so I have two different keyboard rigs depending on which band I play in.
Yes.
With the McCartney band, which was why I had, might as well talk about the organ for a second.
Yeah. So, let's talk about that.
So I have the Pneuma organ. Let me backtrack for 1 second. I was not using an organ in the McCartney band initially, and then the band added "Let Me Roll It," and
Yeah.
Wix Wickens does like a phenomenal organ solo live, and whenever I'm learning a song, I listen to the studio version, and then I look on YouTube and try to watch as many live versions as I can of the band performing it, just so that I get a concept of what their intent
Yep.
in the live environment is, because it's going to be different than a studio environment.
Absolutely.
And anyway, so he does this one thing, and I'm just gonna put my ears in for a second, because
Sure.
it'll drive me crazy trying to play this without them. But basically, it's he does the organ swell. He does a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And when we first did the song live, I did not have the organ.
Yep.
And I went to do that technique on the key lab, which
yeah.
it was, I didn't break a key, but I almost cut my hand.
Yes.
And I know there are guys that can probably, use the key lab and do it fine.
Yep.
With it. But, I used an A100 on stage for years that was chopped, and that's kind of where my approach comes from, the more of the heavy.
So for folks who don't understand, because I was one of those folks at one point, what actually is different about the key bed of an organ that makes you want to play that type of thing on an organ and not on a MIDI controller?
Right. Well, there's two things. The first is what's called a waterfall keyboard, which or waterfall key bed, waterfall keyboard, which is a softer, rounder edge to the key. If you feel a regular piano key, it's going to have a lip to it that kind of sticks out, right?
Yes.
I guess that's just part of the original. Because they used to have ivory on the keys initially, and maybe that was just how they would attach the ivory to the keys, and they always left that little over.
Yeah. I've never
section.
seen a piano
I don't
that doesn't
know.
have it. I always expect that to be there.
Yeah, it's on my PX5. I use a PX5, Casio PX5 for as a controller for my bottom controller.
Yep.
And it has it. I don't know. I think that's just cosmetic. Yeah, exactly. But for an organ, for me, I definitely, if I'm going to play organ technique and do, the slides and things like that, I really need something with that smoother edge to it, so that I don't. Well, I mean, it just feels good.
Yeah. Right.
But I started playing organ like years and years ago, so to be able to do that, and it's a totally different. I'm not saying you couldn't get the sound doing it on a regular controller, but you're definitely not going to physically feel the same doing it on a controller that you would feel running it down the edge of the organ.
Yes.
And I found that. So anyway, so I went online, and I really, I'm not a full-time musician anymore. I have limited funds, and I couldn't just go out and buy, whatever I wanted as an organ. So I just went online, and I found a Numa organ, which is a Studio Logic brand.
Yep.
And I found it at a decent price. I bought it. It was a weight factor there was a weight factor too, because like most older guys, I have a bad back, so I didn't want to have something that weighed like 50 pounds.
Of course. Yeah.
And so I got the Numa, and it's fine. I like the sound of it. It's different than, I have a multimedia, IK Multimedia BX3 that I use at times as a VST.
Yes.
And that definitely has a different sound than the Numa. The other thing you asked me, I said there were two things about an organ.
I was going to have you follow up.
Right. The second is key response. So I'm barely touching the top. Okay. Organs traditionally Hammond organs traditionally had a very quick response, a very high response level, let me say. So that can impact your organ technique as well when you're soloing if you want to play extremely fast parts. Not saying that, I know there are guys out there who can play really fast parts on any controller.
Yep.
I just like,
yep.
if I'm going to play an organ part, I like having the quicker response, and this organ does it. Unfortunately, this organ does not transmit the quick response over MIDI. So if I use this particular product as a controller for the B3X VST, I certainly get all the sounds and I can make all the drawbars and everything interact with it accurately, but I lose that quick response. Not super important, I guess, but like I said, I like the way the Pneuma sounds too, so I incorporate the Pneuma, and I have found that I change how I play a lot of the the McCartney ballads that have organ in them. I am more aggressive with this. I was much more careful playing the key lab as an organ.
Of course.
With this, I can really breathe in the ballads a lot more, and it's a lot more fun for me playing the ballads. So
makes a ton of sense. And are you running that organ into Gig Performer for processing, or is that all local?
It is all local, although I run everything. Gig Performer is my kind of one stop shop of mixing and everything.
So can you show us where that enters the Gig Performer signal chain? And that may even transition us into, I know you're a passionate global rack space user.
Yeah. So I had to make some changes. This might be a little bit confusing for guys, but I had to make some changes with the Zoom. And let me see something. I don't know if you can't see that, right? I would have to share.
Oh, I can see. What are you trying to show?
I was trying to show the other. I was just trying to show the image. I made an image of the global rack space that I use on stage.
I have.
This is a little bit more. This one's just a little bit more complicated than what I typically use on stage.
Hold on one moment.
Reason being,
I can put the. You sent it in the file. Is it the global rack space for Live and Let Die or no? Oh no, never mind. I see. It's different. As you were done. So sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So usually, on the global rack space that you can see right now,
yep.
On the left it says from rack space. It goes to limiter main, and that one's titled GP limiter only, and it's got a 1 next to it.
Yep.
Really, this should actually be. I'm gonna rename it now just for the sake of clarity.
Yep.
All right.
Got it.
So I run 2 separate mixes when I'm on stage.
Okay.
One comes from my rack space. It goes through the limiter main. It could have EQ on it if I'm in the rehearsal space and I'm running my speakers and I'm running speakers. And then the EQs the speakers for the band, and then everything goes to either gain main or gain solo. So gain main looks like that.
Yep.
Gain solo looks like that. It adds I think 3 dB, and it's controlled by just a switch, a pad that I have here.
And is it
on the key
a radio button that you're using on the front end?
On the front end, good question. So let me go out of wiring view. I'll go into panel view.
Yep.
And let me move this out of the way. Okay. So if you look to the right, you see it says solo plus 3 dB.
Yep. Oh, nice.
So that's controlled just by a pad here. That's only for the front of house guy. The reason that I did that is because some front of house guys don't realize that I'm taking a solo. and so they don't bring my keyboards up in the mix.
Yes.
So I've heard live recordings where I like sounded like I was in the cafeteria down
Yeah.
the hall.
Right.
So
Right.
so I decided, okay, I'm going to use that. Like if I'm doing an important sax solo, there's I guess it's a soprano sax solo in What the Man Said, David Bowie's, Paul McCartney song.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'll kick that on just so that it lifts it up a little bit.
Got it. Are
So
you able to
that's
show the widget mapping? I know you didn't go into edit mode, but I'm assuming what you've done there is that you have the states reversed. So like when you click on one of them, it's 0 to 100, and the other one is 100 to 0. It like under the value tab at widget properties. Yeah, and then is the other one backwards? Oh, it's the same.
Do you see how if you look at the scaled value?
Yes.
Or the widget value, it
I
goes
see.
from 0 to 100.
I see. Got it.
So it's either on or off.
Got it.
Basically.
But you're controlling both simultaneously.
Yeah, I am.
So how is one of them, like, basically, how
if
are
I
you
click on
getting it?
so if I click on this one,
Mhm.
see how it's backwards?
Yes, that's what I was asking you.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay, so yes. For folks who don't understand what's happening here, that little red thing there is actually the widget scaling. So you can draw a custom curve there, and what Don has done is on the one on the left there, on and off is left and right, and on the right, on and off is right and left. So by pressing a single button, you get opposite functionality.
Correct.
Yes.
Yep. And if you look in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, we're under mapping.
Yep.
If I click on the left one, it goes to gain main.
Yep.
That plug. And if I click on the right one, it goes to gain solo.
Yep.
Which corresponds, for what it's worth, it corresponds to these two guys here, gain main and gain solo. So gain solo right now is muted. That's why there's that M.
Yep.
And if I click it again, gain main gets muted. So it basically it's just a way to kind of boost the dB level.
Yes.
If I'm doing a solo. So that's what goes out to the front of house.
Okay.
And then what goes out to me again comes from my rack space, goes to another limiter, which goes to my IEMs, which goes out to me.
Wow.
And to the right of that I'm not using this. I just threw this up here so I could talk about this for a second.
Okay.
This is my newer. This is replacing this thing to the left here, and the reason I'm doing that, I put a stereo EQ there.
Yep.
And then I just use that for my IEMs. So recent, I would say maybe it was 3 or 4 months ago, the drummer in the McCartney band, he got himself a new pair of in-ear monitors. It was probably more like 6 months ago. And he went with JH Audio. And he really liked them. I've been using a pair of Shure, I think they were 535s with sensophonic silicone sleeves for my in-ear monitors. And I was listening to live recordings, and I noticed that to me, especially my brass sounds, my sax sound and my horn sounds were sounding shrill on the live recordings. And I was trying to figure out what's going on there. And I decided that, I guess it was maybe 2 months ago, I decided that I was going to upscale my IEMs and go with a better brand. So I looked at JH Audio, and then I found this company called All Clair, which I ended up going with, which is what these are here.
Yes.
My drummer really was insistent that I get an audiogram before I chose my in-ear monitors. And I would actually recommend this procedure to anybody who's older, who's been playing music on stage for a long time. What I found was actually shocking. And I don't know where the paper's over there, so I'm not going to grab it. But
who don't know what an audiogram is, can you explain that?
Right. So an audiogram is you go to an audiologist and they, put the earpieces in your ears and you're in a dead silent booth and they start running frequencies, and you have a hand button to click when you hear the frequency.
Got it.
And as they go up and down, you're clicking buttons, and then finally they say, okay, we're done. And then they show you the printout of what frequencies you're hearing. So think of it as a graphic equalizer, right?
Yes.
As we get older, our graphic equalizer doesn't look like this anymore. It's looking like that. And mine really had a very sharp curve downward from 6K. And what I realized when I went back and started looking at some of my patches, I was compensating for my loss, my frequency loss, and making some of my sounds too bright. So they would sound perfect to me. But when it went through front of house, it was just getting kind of shrill. So my new setup, and I'm still experimenting with this, but this is just kind of what my left ear and right ear are different, a little bit different, with the EQ points. So, I'm starting to try this idea, and it really has actually made a difference. I've started going back into some of my sounds and structuring them so that to a normal hearing range, as normal as it can be anyway. The sounds are just more pleasing sounding.
Wow. That is really cool. You're the first person I've ever heard take this approach. Eric James Music wrote in and asked, what limiter are you using on the mixes?
Oh, okay. So I'm using the Tokyo Dawn Labs TDR, the limiter 6GE. I found that through the Gig Performer forum, which is a phenomenal forum for people to go on. And there are guys that, swear by it. And so I started using it. It's not expensive. It doesn't have, let's see, so the latency is like 0.3 milliseconds.
Wow.
So it doesn't really add that much latency to it. You'll find some plugins can be notorious that way. So I'll go through, when I'm creating a patch, I'll go through to see like how much latency I'm actually adding by some of these VSTs. But that's a great thing that Gig Performer does. You can just hold it over something and see, like FabFilter, the Pro Q3 doesn't have, it's like latency free basically. This one adds a little bit of latency to it, 0.1. Why did I go with that? Because I'm still experimenting with frequencies, and it was easier for me to work with this guy because this guy just has so many options that I come from an old school of hardware. So looking at this to interpret for me is easier than looking at the curve. I mean, the curves are useful and everything. This is, by the way, this was my microphone curve that I use on stage because I like to hear, again, I had that high end loss, and I found that I needed to boost it. Now, some sound guys are probably cringing at looking at how extreme that is. But I could hear myself take a breath when my mic is going into that. And, for the, I do a lot of falsetto backups in the bands. So I like to be able to, stay on point. I'll also talk about that for a second. So what I get from front of house goes into, and again, this, the audio inputs here are actually not accurate for what I use on stage. I had to pull things back and mess with things because of Zoom and trying to get the loop back doing what we're doing. But typically what I have is my channel 1. See how it says loop back in 1 and loop back 2? Okay, so loop back is robbing these 2 channels basically for the Zoom call. Normally what I do is I run my microphone goes into input 1. Front of house sends me a mix, and that goes into input 2. And those are both going in from the front of my Ultralight Mark V.
Got it.
Okay, which is a Mark of the Unicorn. Now, I will say originally I was using a Focusrite,
Mm-hmm.
and the Focusrite that I was using only had 4 outputs.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to experiment with sending multiple outputs to the front of house guy. Like if I could route my sax sound on its own output
Yep.
if I had more outputs. So I decided to go with the Ultralight Mark V, which did that. And I did find that my latency was lower on the Mark of the Unicorn
Well,
compared to the Focusrite. And I did that using the Gig Performer latency test.
yes.
You
Can you
know,
explain what that is? That's, by the way, a feature I have used before and love it, but I think a lot
yeah.
of people don't even know we have that.
Okay. So get out of this. I think I got this thing. How I think I'm being blocked by this.
Oh, the Zoom window is blocking you?
Yeah, if I click OK, do you still have me?
I do. Yep, I still have you.
Okay, all right. So, okay, so you have if you go into your window tab and you click down and you'll see going down, 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 you'll see measure device latency.
Yep.
What it's going to tell you to do, and we obviously won't do that now.
Yep, right.
But what it's going to tell you to do is, use a short patch cable to connect any one of your audio interface outputs to input one of that device. Definitely do not have your headphones hooked up for this.
No. No.
And then you click on measure latency.
Yes.
And so right now, this is giving me 11.6, which is, there are probably guys that can get much better latency than what I'm getting right now.
Yep.
But for me, that's doable. I might be able to get it lower if I change some things in my computer and whatever.
Yes.
I just wanted it under 12.
Yep.
Yep. Because at 12, I was starting to notice like some piano stuff didn't feel right.
Right.
It was, I don't know, just felt a little bit microsecondly after what I was actually playing.
Right.
So I'm okay with that amount of latency.
Yep. Absolutely.
I'd like to get less, but
yeah,
anyway, I only have so many hours in a day.
Right.
I mean, I work all day. I'm burnt out. I come home and I got to think about going to work the next day. So, most of this stuff was done, in bits and pieces of when I had time to do something.
Yep. Yep, absolutely.
All right. So anyway, so that, and the other thing I'll just mention is the Casio.
Yep.
So the Casio, if you look, you see how the Vox slider.
Yes.
So my Casio has sliders on it, and I use those sliders to control when I'm on stage what I'm hearing. The one on the left, the story behind that, it was a Blue Genies gig, and we were playing a place where I have since upgraded my my belt pack wireless receiver.
Okay.
But at the time, my wireless receiver, I think the wiring in the club, or there was just so much Wi-Fi, or I don't know what was going on. I could not use my wireless in ears, and and we're getting ready to play. Yes. So I had to figure out how am I going to hear myself on stage. Uh-huh. So I had a extension cord that I could run from my in-ears right into the Mark of the Unicorn.
Yes.
The headphone output. So I did that. But I wanted to be able to control, the Mark of the Unicorn has these really tiny dials.
Yep.
And I didn't like that.
Yep.
So I threw up this fader here really quickly in my global rack space, and then I just linked it to the third fader.
Yep.
On my CX5, on my PX5S, the Casio. Right. So I was able to control my IEM volume while I was playing on stage. So in the course of the night, I'll either turn my vocal mic up or I'll keep it down. Reason being, you get bleed through no matter where you are on stage. You're going to get bleed through on your vocal mic. Yes. So if the stage volume is coming through too loud, I'll keep that basically turned off or barely turned on. And the same with the front of house. A lot of times, you do your sound check, you think everything's right, and then you find out you're not hearing the other singers for some reason, and you have to boost your signal from front of house. So I do it that way, and that's all controlled, and it goes, through. I think it might. Let's see if this. Yeah.
Yep.
So I have a mixer here, and it's controlling my two faders, and then let's see. Yeah. So that's moving from my dial. I've got 5 dials on the front of the PX5S also.
Yes.
And yeah, input 3 and 4, and input 5 and 6. So I can control those levels from the PX5S as well.
Yes.
And I like having hardware knobs that I can grab in an emergency, and know where they are. So those are all like near my left hand. So I just like that idea.
Yep.
Initially I started with the Keylab, trying to use the faders on the keyboard itself.
Yep.
Let's see, which is
here I can.
you can't really see them, but yeah, you can imagine anyway. So I found that cumbersome because you tend to reach for right hand buttons with your right hand.
Yes.
And I'm in the middle of playing or doing something, and I need to make a quick adjustment. Now I still use these occasionally.
Yep.
But initially I was trying to do everything in real time.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to use the faders in real time. I was trying to use the on-off buttons to turn. My concept initially, before I realized the usefulness of the variations.
Yep.
Was to try to control everything. See how on there's a number under here. It says number 1, right? So that corresponded to my Keylab buttons.
Got it.
And initially I was going to try to do everything in real time.
Wow.
But then I realized, well, why not just hit a foot switch that steps you through everything? So I have, I just have a big sustain pedal that routes to my Keylab.
Yep.
And then that, steps me through all my variations.
Yes.
As far as stepping through the different sound sets, or the rack spaces, I should say, my forward and backward buttons on the Keylab do that. So as we go through our playlist, again, it's a hardware button that I can click.
Yes.
And
so
my
computer at all. There's no reason to.
No,
Everything is mapped. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't. It does have a touch screen, but I never use it.
Yep.
And my panic button is it's the red record button on the Keylab, which I don't really usually have to use, but I put it there, just as an emergency.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Variations are so useful. And I often find that folks who really dive into building sounds, especially if they come from a model where they're used to having to do the knob twisting, all that kind of goes away, unless you need the actual movement of the knob as part of the sound itself. There's really no reason not to just save the state of a widget and step through. It's just
I agree. Yeah. I mean, if I'm doing something, let's see, Golden Summers is a good one.
Okay.
So I can actually get rid of this because we're not doing a half step down anymore. But anyway, so very, very cluttered.
Yeah,
is a good word. My wife gets on me all the time how difficult it is to live with me, because this is me, folks. Sorry, this is just how it is. This is how it is. But but you got to realize, I had to throw things together over time, and this is like a history of me with Gig Performer, right?
Yep.
See like the Bowie thing came later.
Yep.
Okay, so these are some of the Bowie groups, and these are these are the McCartney. So the McCartney stuff was early,
Yes.
and so I had to make all these notes and put them up there so that I wouldn't lose my mind as I'm trying to remember chords and
Yes.
positions and what part is where. And I actually forgot what I was going to say. I think it had to do with bringing things in and out.
Yeah, we were talking about variations.
Right. So as far as variations go, well, I guess Live and Let Die is a good one.
Yeah.
You have the main stuff. And all the traditional splits and things like that. And then for the quiet part where the answer is, and then it goes back to, so when it goes back to the second time the phrase comes in, there's a flute part, right? Or a piccolo or whatever it is. That's really high in the pitch. So, but there's still, that is still there below the strings. So what I was able to do is I could, for that variation, that note is playing the strings, but it's also playing the drone.
And how did you set
that lets me play with my right hand.
Yes.
Lets me play the high piccolo. I guess it's a piccolo or I don't know, special flute.
How did you set that up? Is that bypassing MIDI in blocks and wiring view?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm using I'm doing it all with MIDI in blocks. Yes. So multiple times. So I'll have key stands for key lab.
Yep.
And Casio. Oh, here we are. Casio G note brass.
Aha.
So that's going to the G brass, and the key lab plays the G brass down here. So that's an isolated part, right?
Yep.
And then here I have the timpani on the key lab, and that'll be to the left there.
Yes.
And then the iconic flute riff.
Yep.
Is down there.
Yep. So you just have multiple MIDI in blocks so that you're able to trigger the low note from the high note?
Yeah. So if you look at the Casio G note, see it's only playing one note.
Yep. But it's got that transpose, -24.
It's got its transpose down, 2 octaves. So that from this position, it's playing that note.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I guess since we're talking about MIDI in blocks and tunings, do I have it loaded? Give me 1 second here.
Sure. And while you do that, folks who are watching, if you have any questions for Don, go ahead and let us know. Pop them in the chat, and we'll get him to answer those. Did you drag something in, Don, or are you opening in other areas?
Yeah. So I wanted to talk for a second about 1985.
Wow. Okay.
Because we're talking about MIDI in blocks, right?
Yes.
All right. So with 1985, there's a number of components to that song in terms of what the keyboards are doing or what the keyboards could do.
Yes.
You have the, there's a droning thing there. And then there's also, let me see this. Okay. So this note has a filter sweep going on and a brass part going on at the same time. And towards the end, there's a climb to the brass part and a descending to the brass part, and the filter sweep is going on simultaneously.
Yeah.
So I'm doing that with different MIDI in blocks, playing different notes. The reason that I did that is because there's also a soprano sax. So all of that's, sorry about my sloppy playing, but I'm playing without my in-ears. So I'm just kind of, but so there's a descending brass part, an ascending brass part, and the soprano sax part, and there's the filter sweep. So all of that's happening with my left hand so that my right hand can play the soprano sax part.
Yes. Wow.
And I did all of that using the different. So here you can see it's one part's transposed 16 notes, and that's just on this one note.
Yep.
So that would be.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
So that just gets into how you can creatively use your MIDI in blocks to play only one note that you need. And it lets you create, you know, different types of harmonies.
Yes. So I'm just curious, did you do this before the release of Gig Performer 5?
Well, I got started on Gig Performer. I might have bought Gig Performer 3.
Okay.
And then evolved into 5. I mean, this is Gig Performer 5.
Yep.
I started, I think the McCartney thing, I started with Gig Performer 4.
Got it. So I'm like remembering like through the years. So what you're essentially doing here is you're using multiple MIDI in blocks to create chords.
Correct.
Which I've seen people do over and over again. And then we also have some people now in Gig Performer 5 who just use the chord maker, which does a similar thing. But the frameworks of people who have been longtime Gig Performer users, and I see this only with people who actually play music, is that once it works, they don't ever change it.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, hey, you know, it takes me to the grocery store and back. Why do I need, you know, why do I need something else?
And the other upside of this is, in this context anyway, is you're bypassing the MIDI in blocks. So you're, you know, in some ways the MIDI in blocks are actually part of your instrument here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Are you just using widgets to turn those on and off?
I'm sorry?
Are you just using widgets to turn those on and off on the front panel?
The MIDI in blocks?
Specifically the chord ones, the ones you were just demoing.
Yeah, so good question. So let's go to the front panel. So you can see all these labeled bypass.
Yes.
Okay, so when I hit my foot pedal, they're not bypassed anymore. You know, and then for the final ending, you know, at that point, I don't want, you know, a clutter of harmonies on my left hand because I'm playing that part live. Yes. And I have for the final note, I do have my expression pedal. If you see where it's labeled Jupiter 8 filter.
Yep.
Okay, so my expression pedal sweeps it up.
Nice. Yep.
You know, it's manually controlling.
I'm noticing there that you've set some ranges for the for that widget. Can you talk about why you did that and how?
Good question. A lot of this stuff I just, you know, I experiment with. Okay, here we go.
Yep.
It's a scaled value.
Okay. Yep.
So that's what I did was I assigned that to the Jupiter 8, which is the Arturia Jupiter 8 before that I use on this, to the VCF cutoff.
Yes.
Okay, so that widget is assigned to that. And then the MIDI response is the controller, which is my foot pedal.
Yep.
And then the value of it, I scaled because I didn't want, I think I was listening to where, you know, you might hear one of my cats in the background.
Oh, no, can't hear them, but.
Oh, okay, good. Because it's very annoying. Trust me. Uh, anyway, so the reason I scaled it is because I wanted to get a specific sound of the filter. In other words, I wanted to get a specific range of the filter that would open. And I didn't want to have to worry about moving my foot ever so slightly
Yes.
to get that. So it's the full throw of my foot pedal, of my expression pedal,
Yes.
that throws it. But because of scaling, it keeps it exactly where I want it to be.
Yes.
So I must have started it. I probably went to, okay, where do I want this? And then probably worked with the scaling to get it to give me exactly where I want it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. It's I started with all Ableton, and I remember at first the widget scaling feature in Gig Performer didn't really make much sense to me. And then I had this moment where I was like, oh, it actually lets you just control only what you want to control. And when you're combining that with a foot pedal, it really makes a big difference because, varying degrees of accuracy on a foot pedal.
Exactly.
And it also makes a massive difference when you're grouping widgets, because you could turn a knob from the lowest point to the highest point and have 5 different widgets turn a different amount or even a different direction, all from a single thing. So it ends up being a very powerful
Absolutely
feature.
right. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I probably do. I'm fairly certain that I do that somewhere, but not sure which one I used that for, what you were describing.
Yes. Yes.
Let's see. Do you want to talk for a second about the streamer, the live streaming player?
Let's do that.
So, Silly Love Songs. Let me see if this is the one. Let's see. All right. So, interesting story about Silly Love Songs. And, it starts off with that signature kind of loop.
Yes.
Audio loop. And initially, I took a snippet of it and put it into Contact.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was using Contact to play it.
Yep.
However, there is a glitch that I guess a lot of people in Gig Performer know about in Contact, and some of them found a way around it, I think. But what happens is sometimes Contact won't play the loop all the way through, or it won't trigger it, and I don't know if that's just my setup, but I read, from other things that other people were having those kind of issues.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like it has to do with some component in Contact, and I really didn't have time to keep exploring it. So what I would usually do before a McCartney show, I would just go through and trigger everything, during sound check and make sure everything was correct.
Yep.
However, recently I realized, well, maybe it would be better to bypass Contact.
Yes.
For that particular thing, since it's the most noticeable glitch. Yep. When you're there by yourself and it's dead silence and you hit play, and what if it cuts out halfway through, which it has done before with Contact. Yes. So instead, I set one of my pads to activate the file in live streaming player.
Wow. Okay.
And that's just so much easier.
Yes.
It's so much safer. Yes. So I have a little, play button. I have a stop button. Mm-hmm. And it's great. And I do the same thing. There's a David Bowie song we do that starts off with that thing too. So, and I use the player. And I have a stop button for that. And I like having a stop button because, just because I like it, yes. I like to be able to stop it. So live streaming player, great thing. I use this MIDI file player in Let's Dance, which has the it has the intro for that.
And
The
for
reason
your
I
MIDI
use
file player, you are you using it like just to the global BPM? Are you running clicks or are you tapping through?
right. So I put a BPM controller
Uh-huh.
on my lowest C sharp key,
Got it.
which is a tap,
Yep.
and it's global. So if you look, I don't know if you
Yep.
guys can
I
see
can
it
see
on the
it.
screen where
Mm-hmm.
it says BPM.
Yes.
You know,
Yep.
what I'm using that for is the percussion part that's in Let's Dance, the
Got
David
it.
Bowie song Let's Dance. Um, that part.
Uh-huh. Got it.
So I created two MIDI sequences that play that part. Initially, I tried playing it live and doing everything else that I'm doing in the beginning. I said, you know what,
Mm-hmm.
and in the course of the song, I'm doing brass and I'm doing the
Yes.
the organ and all that stuff. I didn't want to be bothered with it. There are probably guys that are classically trained that could probably cover it all
Yep.
with their left hand and be accurate every time. That's not me.
Yep.
So I decided I'll try a MIDI sequence of it.
Yep.
And the only problem with that is sometimes the drummer, any drummer,
Yep.
unless they're, well, depending on where they're coming from and if they use a tempo click track or whatever,
Yep.
their tempo might not be 100% where I initially programmed that. Let's say
Yep.
they had a cup of coffee before the gig or
Right.
something. I don't know.
Yes.
But anyway, so what this tap tempo does is when we start the vocal intro and I hear the count, I can click in the tempo
Yep.
so that it perfectly stays in sync with the song.
Yes.
And if for some reason it were to get out, 4 clicks and I'm back in.
Right.
Um,
Right. I noticed that you have your time signature set to 16:4. Why is that?
Don't know.
Okay. Great.
I don't know the answer to that question. Did it default to that?
I don't know. Well, I assumed it had something to do with the way that you wanted it to respond to tap tempo, but it maybe not.
That's thinking deeper than I. Now it's been a while since I created that.
Yep.
And at the time I created it, I still didn't know. Well, and I still don't really know everything there is to know about this. I mean, it's all a discovery.
Yep.
And this was more of a, well, let's see if I put this button here and do this, will this work?
Yes.
And I went on the forum and I read stuff and I experimented.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an experiment. That might be what I had to do to play that sequence correctly. There's also a
Yep.
and that's synced to tempo also.
Got it.
So the 16/4 might have to do with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it could very well have to do with the way it was responding to my and that's global, right?
Yep.
So yeah.
Yep. We also have 3 questions coming in, so I'm gonna pull some of these up. So with something as complex as this, how do you approach working out which sounds you need at which points in which zones of the keyboard for the number of hands you have?
Okay. So well, let's take 1985, which is the most recent one that we added to our set list.
Okay.
So when Jed told me he wanted to do that song, so I listened to it. And I listened to it a bunch of times. I listened to the studio recording a bunch of times. That one, I think I don't know that I've even listened to the live version, if they even do it, if there is a live version. But so I listened for the signature parts first.
Mm-hmm.
Or Live and Let Die is another one. There are certain signature parts. So when I'm listening to the song, I'm thinking, okay, what needs to be there and what can I leave out?
Yep.
And then I think, what part do I need to play with my right hand? I approach it more like what would feel better on what hand.
Yep.
If it's a fancy part,
mm-hmm.
then I might want to play that with my right hand.
Right.
If it's a pad or something, well, then I might play that with my left. If it's a piano, obviously I use both hands.
Right.
But so I listen to that. I'll listen to the song multiple times. 1985, I listened to that a bunch of times. Just not making notes or anything, just listening to it, just listening to the song, getting the song in my head. And, and I heard signature synth parts. And of course, I heard the horn parts towards the end, and then I heard the soprano sax part, and I was like, oh man, how am I going to do that? So this is how I discovered, really, that I could use the whole MIDI in block thing to create the descending and ascending parts simultaneously. And I was like, oh man, this is so cool, but that was kind of it. And then every time I listen to a song, I still go back and listen to the stuff because I'm playing songs that I really like to listen to. I love McCartney stuff. I love Bowie stuff. I love listening to the stuff. I listen to a lot of other kind of music, but sometimes, when I'm at work, I'm running Pandora all day long. I work with patients. We never really got into that, but I work in healthcare, and I do medical imaging, and I play Pandora for the patients while I'm doing their scans and stuff. So I listen to, music all day long. I'm blessed in that way. And frequently I'll hear a part or I'll hear something about a part that maybe I didn't realize. There's this little thing in 1985 that goes up as the verse. He goes to different pitches of his filter within the song. And I never know, you wouldn't notice that unless you're really listening. But I was like, how can I do that? So then I thought, okay, if I play this with my thumb and move that with my left hand, I can do it. Now I could have done maybe variations for that, but I didn't want it to get too crazy. But that's kind of how I do it. I listen for what are the signature sounds, what's important, what part could be dropped out at this part. If I'm playing this part in the song, do I still need that thing going on? And if I do, then I try to find a way to do it. As far as where the splits and layers go, it really depends on the instrumentation. If it's something that I think would feel good on the Casio, which has more of a piano key bed, or if I can get away with it on the piano key bed, I will. I don't do any synth soloing on this. And we really didn't even talk about the Seaboard Rise, which that's another animal, that I use in the Bowie thing, because the Bowie thing is more synth-y. And I do some solos on that lets me bend notes just by sliding up and down the membrane and add filter sweeps and things like that by pressing harder or going forward with it. So that's a great soloing device. I don't use it in McCartney because I don't need it. But in the Bowie thing, it's useful.
Okay, Glenn Short wants to know if you have any dedicated widgets or MIDI in blocks for the breath controller.
I might have. I think I saved not widgets. That's actually a good question, and I was thinking to myself that I really ought to do that.
Sure.
I'm sure there's a way. Is there a way to save a favorite rack space?
Well,
so okay. So probably what I should, as we're talking, what I should do is I should create a rack space specifically for this. And then when I'm doing a song that I know I'm going to use this in, just load that first and then build my rack space with that in mind. Because that would load everything that I would normally use this for. I'm still evolving. So that's a good question, and it's definitely a good point. I do use, if I go here, I use favorites extensively. As you can see. But these favorites are always I'm always, look, I got the Seaboard sax here, I got Obladi piano here. A lot of it is just because I might change a rack space or do something stupid and remove a sound that I worked a long time on. So think of these as my custom sounds that I created.
And they can even be, depending on how you save them, it can be several plugins. Can be a whole
Yeah, oh yeah,
configuration.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's whatever you highlight. If I
Yes.
highlight this, I could save that whole, 3 section as something.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And then final question from the user here, and then I have one more for you.
Okay.
Was another question about the limiter. Was are you using this for protection or for the pleasure of a more leveled mix?
Yes. I'm using it for protection against digital noise.
Okay.
Yeah, that and actually the other thing I want to talk about, or the other point
Yeah.
regarding the limiter, front of house guys that I have worked with have always told me that it's best to try to avoid the spikes.
Yep.
And I will tell you that if you're in sound check and you do a sound that spikes,
Mm-hmm.
your level for the entire mix is probably going to be brought down to that
Right.
spike level.
Yep.
So the limiter keeps me from getting over enthusiastic with pushing some levels to the point where a sound guy will just be freaking out.
Yes.
Because it'll just be like all over the place. And it's a lot easier for them to find a space for you in the total front of house mix if your levels are kept, fairly. I'm not saying obviously every instrument, I'm doing swells and everything with orchestra patches during ballads and things, but you don't want it to go past a certain point, because then that's it's going to ruin you for the night coming through the front of house, because the sound guy's not going to know what to do with you.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, my question for you, and this is what I ask everybody who comes through, but if you were giving somebody a piece of wisdom to get started with Gig Performer on the right foot, what would you recommend they do?
Well, my method was, I had a purpose.
Yes.
In other words, I was going to use it for performance.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a performance that was offered to me that I knew I needed to shoot for.
Yes.
So that was my goal. That was the first thing. You have to have a goal in terms, like, I'm not one of those guys that will sit for hours and hours when he gets it, obviously, because I had Gig Performer 3 and I messed with it a little bit, and then 4, and so having a purpose in mind is important. And for me, what works best is to approach it from the song I want to perform. Not, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this, I want to do that. What do I need to do for this song?
Mm-hmm.
And then as you build your songs, you evolve.
Yes.
You find, okay, this song I needed to do this in. Or this song, well, I wonder if I can do this. And if you don't know how to do it, you go on to the Gig Performer forum, because I guarantee someone has already done it.
Yep.
I mean, Gig Perform, like when we were talking about how I was using the different ranges, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I was setting for my values for my expression pedal response, or for the pitch bend.
Yes.
Pitch bend idea I got from David Jameson.
Yep.
As far as like, because when I was trying to use the pitch bend to pitch bend a value with a widget, I was all over the place. It was like bending it like an ungodly amount of notes.
Yes.
And I just wanted it to only stay in a certain range. And by using a widget to do that, and is constraining the term?
Yeah, sure.
That I'm looking for?
You're setting a range, right?
So like on my pitch bend for.
Yep.
So I just wanted it to go down. I didn't want it to go wow.
Yep.
And it was just looking at what he had said about how to do that, and going in and, So funny thing about this one I actually changed on the Swam saxophone response. But moving forward, all of the ones, which is interesting, right?
Yep.
So
Oh, yeah,
moving
there's an
forward,
example.
yeah, all the ones moving forward, I learned the David Jameson method, which is just so much better of a system. And you just you see, you can see where the scale value is.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I put that in just to add a little bit of a detuning
Yep.
or bending of those particular notes.
Yes.
And so to the point of the question, yeah, I mean, this isn't a very complex looking rack space,
Yeah.
but that pitch bend, that just adds so much to the
Mm-hmm.
feel. Like I do that by bending,
Yep.
by pressing down. And to me, I feel that.
Yes.
I feel that bending the same way a guitar player feels it when he bends his string.
Yes.
Um,
Yes,
yeah, so
absolutely.
just take it slow. To my front of house, it controls my IEM mix. I have 2 separate mixes, so I can control everything I want to hear, and it's separate from what I send out to the front of house. And I'm able to do that because I have, the outputs that I have from my digital interface. So that's the other thing you need to figure out is, what's important to you in a digital interface.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, because that's an important component
Yes.
of what you're going to be using it for.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Don, thank you so much for sharing your setup with us.
Hey,
This is
glad to do it.
wonderful. Yeah, and for folks who want to connect with you, you are on the Gig Performer Forum.
Correct.
And you also, in the description right now, have your band information. So if anyone
Okay,
is
cool.
hoping to see you play, you can check out all of Don's stuff below. And yeah, and we can see you play. Do you have any upcoming performances, Don?
The McCartney experience is going to be at the Virginia Wine Festival.
Nice.
Oh, I was reaching for my phone because my phone has my calendar in it. I think that's Jed's probably going to kill me. Sorry, Jed. I think it's the 30th of May.
Okay.
I think it's the 30th of May. But we're also going to be at the Milton Theater. If you go on the McCartneyExperience.com,
Yep.
Our shows are there. And the Blue Genies, the David Bowie show, I know, is going to be the end of August at Ram's Head live in Annapolis. And again, that's the Blue Genies. If you go on that website, I'm sure any subsequent shows will be there. That band doesn't play as often around here simply because those guys are in Florida.
Yep.
And they have a version down there. But it's always fun to play with them when they
Yep.
come up here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Don.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. Friends, we'll be back next week, same time. And until then, we'll see you soon. See you soon, Don.
Thank you, Brett.
Yep.
My pleasure.